Okay, we are live.
All right, today.
Live from.
Sorry, you want to do the live?
Go ahead. No, I don't. I don't.
Live from 3 various locations around the planet. Today is Thursday or Friday, depending on where you are, November 21st or 22nd. This is our weekly meeting to check in on development tasks for Backdrop CMS. Before we get into code stuff, I just wanted to say that today I reviewed the PMC issue queue for things that have been voted on recently, and I've assembled a list of things that need blog posts, and I think that it would be good to write the content, at least as like draft, and get it scheduled so that should there ever be a week when we don't have a blog post, we'll just be able to launch one. We can even put like dates in there, like when this was voted on, and just so it's like more of a PSA than anything urgent, because these are all rather old at this point. There are lots of new module ports in progress. I've been working on a couple of sites this past week. I noticed there's a bunch of other people creating a bunch of new stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you to all the people who are doing all of the work in Contrib. That's great. We don't have any new releases this week, but there's a bunch of work happening nonetheless. For our websites, backdropcms.org, the forum, and the API site, we have been sprinting this week on solving a bunch of issues on those sites around visual things, functionality changes, features that were missing and or intended but never got implemented. And there's been a whole bunch of work happening there. So I want to thank everybody that's been working on the websites also. We had a kickoff sprint last Sunday. We're going to have another kickoff sprint or another wrap-up sprint. I don't know, maybe keep going sprint this Sunday. And there's been a bunch of work happening between those two events. So thank you, Tim, for organizing this. I think it's definitely something that it has been needed for a while, and it's great to see a lot of these issues getting attention. If you want to join in, everybody is welcome to pitch in. There are issue queues under the organization Backdrop Ops that have all of the stuff for all of the sites. And if you want a priority, what to work on, hop in Gitter, chat with people, I would say it's probably the issues at the top of those lists that are getting attention that need the most help at the moment. But there are always more. And there should be sanitized database backups if you need one to get a local site going at sanitize.backdropcms.org. Ask in Gitter if you need credentials for that. All right, moving on to Backdrop, the product. Nate is usually here for this weekly meeting and can run through the issues in core that are getting worked on. I don't know where he is today, so I'm going to do it, but I have not looked at the status of all of these issues, so I apologize in advance. I'm not necessarily up to speed on where they all are. So let's start with the 1.14.2 release. It looks like we have this meta issue of views cross ports 3685. Gregory, do you happen to know where we are in any of those?
Yeah, no work was done. So we merged all the previous batches, and now we need to just work on it. It just takes time.
Okay.
So there's nothing ready for review. Okay.
We also have the flexible templates follow-up issues. There's a meta at 4046. A lot of those are getting attention. I think one of them we just talked about in our user experience meeting. We finally got consensus on language to use for the options for how your rows should behave. So that one will get a little bumped forward, but there's a bunch of sort of low-hanging fruit in there that I think we could probably get sorted out by 115 if we wanted to. Of course, there's a lot of stuff in there may not be as important as other issues. So if you're interested in working on flexible template stuff, that is there for the offering. There's also a handful of other issues currently slated for the 1.14.2 milestone. A lot of them are bugs that have pull requests, because any bug fix that has a pull request can be slotted for the next milestone. And I would love it if we could make an effort to go through and do a bunch of reviewing. We, mostly meaning myself, I'm not great at doing reviewing. I love writing code and not reading it. But this time I want to go through and spend some time doing a bunch of testing on all the pull requests that are already in there. It would be great if we could get some of the old ones either marked back to needs work if they need rebases, or adjusted so that they can be committed and get those bug fixes resolved. More exciting than bug fixes, we have a bunch of new features scheduled for the 1.15 release. And a lot of these have been getting attention since our weekly meetings highlight them. We now have advocates letting us know how everything's going with each of them. Top one here, adding an image library modal for image fields, number 30 to 97. That issue, I think, has some progress this week from Graham, worked on getting a search box added to the modal so you can type in like the name of your file and try and find it that way. But there's a problem with the way the JavaScript is acting on the page there that we need to get resolved. There's also some feedback in the issue. It was originally developed without using modals. And so there's some feedback there to make it use modals, and that's a little tricky. So anyone who wants to help work on that, I'm sure it would be appreciated. The issue is number 3297. There's a couple of versions there for pull requests for testing, but I think it does need more work at this point. All right. The next issue, auto menu settings. This is number 1610. Is had an update today. There was a pull request that I'd filed recently that had some commit from some other issue I was working on in it. So I made kind of a mess of things. And BW Panda went and cleaned up after me. So thank you, Peter, for fixing my pull request. And so now there's a new pull request there that needs review. So if someone wants to go test that sandbox, I think this pull request in particular is very close to being done. It's pretty straightforward and simple. And if we can get it in, then we will free up Peter to focus on other core issues if he would like to advocate for them. Next is adding a recent news box to the dashboard. This is number 3566. I'm not sure if you've looked at this recently, Tim, but last I remember is that we needed an update to the Views JSON module. Is that still the case? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding, is that Nate wanted the output in a certain format, and that was where we were hung up. And I was hoping that that sort of backdrop infrastructure related, we might get to it this week.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
So I've been meaning to look at it closer and then ping you, but
Okay. All right, then we have this issue number 1575, providing a way to re-enable the disabled and currently hidden text formats. So Gregory, I'm not sure if you've looked at this recently.
No, same update as before, so we got it pretty close. It was breaking other things, so Doc Wilmot has proposed a solution that seems less intrusive and will touch less things, so it's less likely to break things. We just need to revise the pull request. It's just that I've been focusing on bug fixes, but since the December is upon us and close to the 1.15 release, I will start working on that as well. I believe first week of December I should be able to start working on it.
Great. The next issue is number 1992, and this is about getting signatures on packages. Nate isn't around this week to give us an update on that one, but I know that he did a bunch of work on it last week. So I would assume that you can watch last week's video for that update. And I don't know if anything happened this week, but we can check issue 1992 to find out later.
Yep.
All right, next up is entity cache in core. This is issue number 74. Joseph, I don't know if you're here anymore. I haven't checked on that one recently. I don't know what's going on, but I'm pretty sure we ran into some problem with needing like some kind of an entity create hook because there was an action that needed to fire every time an entity was created. And I believe we decided to support all of the core entities out of the box and allow contrib entities to add that support for that at the time, but I'm not sure if we have a new pull request for that yet or not. We can check.
Yeah, last comments there were about performance. So some testing was done and some numbers provided.
Okay. The next issue is number 1475. And this is about changing the way our workflow states work. Sort of a behind the scenes change that will change the user interface very little, but that will make the system make a little bit more sense so that in the future, Contrib can have useful workflow states. So things like having an unpublished revision that's in draft state is something that's really hard to do right now. Either the node is published or not, and there is either a revision or not, but the revisions themselves are not published and publishable.
So yeah, this is known as forward revisions. So, yeah.
So I think this is a good, important one. I believe we're pretty close on it. It's, I haven't looked at it. I saw the email yesterday come in with new feedback on it, but I really want to look at the pull request. I haven't looked at that yet. I don't know if anyone has a better update.
So there was, at some point, there was a blocker 4181, the stub editors that we needed to remove. So we have done that. This has been merged, but now we need a change record for it. And because that was a change, a suitable change, that's why both issues have been pushed to 115.
Okay. So that other issue, the stub entities issue, was a fix that has been committed to 115 branch already. I ran into some other problems that also needed that fixed this week. So I was like, oh, perfect, this is already fixed, that's great. So that's fantastic that that makes workflow states work better too. I was wondering how Doc Wilmot arrived at that one. Didn't read the whole history of it, but that's great.
Yep.
So I wanted to say that that pull request probably needs updating, but thank you to Doc Wilmot for doing all of the amazing work on fixing the hard problems in Backdrop.
By the way, now that I'm looking at that issue, we should update the processes to have a step to check for issues that are tagged as needs change record, because this will end up in 115, but we need to make sure that there is a change record up for it.
Yeah, I was also, since I was working with a Contrib module, I was a little bit confused about what the change record might say, and how that use of that function would be any different. But yeah, I don't know.
I will have to reread, like if I was to put something together, I will have to reread the whole ticket, but I think that I'm not the best person to sort of put the change record up. Maybe either Nate or Dr. Witt.
I looked in the module I was working on, and it did look like I could call entity create directly instead of creating a stub entity. You can create a whole entity, but I didn't know if that was going to have any implications that we didn't want. I don't know if creating an entity and not saving it might actually end up saving something. I don't know, but it would be interesting to see what the recommended alternative is. The proposal is to mark that function as deprecated, which means that Contrib shouldn't use it anymore. And even though right now there isn't much in core that uses it, it's used pretty heavily in Contrib. So trying to figure out what a Contrib module should do instead, I think is fairly important. My Contrib module used it in two different places. One of them was to create a node entity, which is fine because I can entity create a node. But another one was to create a fake entity that it didn't actually need an entity. It just needed an object to manipulate. And so in that case, my module wouldn't work at all because there is no class for it to instantiate when it creates the thing. And so I ended up having to create a fake class. So there's now a class in my module called pseudo entity. It is actually an entity that I now have to instantiate instead of using that function. So it just seemed a little weird that like maybe every Contrib module would have to provide a pseudo class. And do we really want do you really want 800 different pseudo classes if the only purpose is just to be a placeholder for something? So I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the alternative to what that function should do or not. So yeah, I think maybe a deeper dive into what we should be doing instead in Contrib would be good. Maybe with some examples. So maybe I'll keep an eye out for that in any of the other projects I'm working on and see what's necessary, but it seems complicated. Okay, so that is it for the 115 queue. I was just thinking today that it's probably time to open a new PMC issue and just get, now that we have a ton of stuff in this 115 queue, originally there were like 4 items, just be like, hey, this is what we're doing for 115. Any objections? Yes, no. Our normal like PMC project vision oversight thing, and make sure that we are doing everything we're supposed to be doing and nothing we're not supposed to be doing. So we'll do that too. But that's it.
Can you clarify that to me? So are you saying that like the PMC in theory approves of each release, or
Yeah,
what
so
exactly
originally,
is happening?
like it's in the PMC's responsibilities to be able to guide the direction of the project. And so we wanted to make sure that we're focusing on things that are important for Backdrop as a whole, rather than things that may be important to one of us for one particular reason. And so just having a set of people look at the list of changes we're going in and go, yeah, those are all fine, I think is a good precaution. We're not like, wait a minute, what is this one thing and why is it getting in here? So it's not necessarily like they're going to, you know, tell us what to do. It's more like, are we going in the right direction?
Sure.
All right, so let's move into the open general discussion section. I don't know if David Radcliffe is with you now, Tim, but the first item on this list was to talk about the
Sure.
Gitter bot.
Let me ask him if he wants to come on the call or if I should talk through me.
Okay.
Okay. So, David, what I explained to them was that you were looking for database credentials to facilitate just the import process into the Heroku app. And what I heard from them was that unless you have access to the server, that doesn't do you any good. And that's, I can't resolve that.
Yeah, I also am not entirely sure how Roku works, or even how the whatever database system we're using, Redis or something, I don't know, for this tool works. Like maybe it is intended to only ever be accessed from a different server and has some connection process, but I'm pretty sure that our current database is not set up that way because it was accessed from the same server on which the code was running. And so we probably don't have any ports open that would allow that. So there isn't any way that anything that's not on the current thing could talk, not on the current server could talk to it, as far as I know.
Okay.
But not being familiar with the technology makes me not entirely confident in that answer.
This translator role is harder than I thought. Just a minute.
Can you give him one earbud?
Actually, maybe. Can you? Actually, sitting next to him, and that would have been easier. We can't reach right now.
It's like telephone.
Yeah. The olden times.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if there's a port or not. Okay, I conveyed that to David. He's thinking about it.
Okay. The two people that can help with that probably are not here right now, but we could, I know Justin is available in the evenings if he has access to that. And then Nate, I don't know, he's hard to get a hold of, but yeah.
I mean, another possibility is if David Radcliffe here he's got the Heroku set up, we've got the code in a GitHub repo, we sort of know where the database is. So, you know, maybe somebody else can just do that final step of connecting it or getting the database in.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Roku.
So my understanding is that the current sites have set their databases as to be accessed only locally, and you wouldn't be able to pull any information from an external source, which Heroku is in that case. So with that DB dump that was
I guess the other
provided, sorry? Yeah, so with that database dump that was provided, maybe it can be set up somewhere temporarily that can be accessed remotely and then point Heroku to it.
Okay.
That's what I'm
I
thinking as a workaround. Yeah.
I didn't hear all of that because I was listening to David as well. He's saying at the very minimum, we would want to, the database dump we have is like a month old now. So
Okay.
if we can't do anything else, we need at least need a fresh database. But your point, Gregory, was?
My point was that all the databases are currently set up to be accessed only locally. So you cannot, for
Right.
example, remotely access the database from d.org.
Right.
So how I would go about it is I would get a fresh DB dump, put it temporarily, excuse me, put it temporarily somewhere where it's publicly accessible or
Sure.
easily accessible, and then point Heroku to it.
Got it.
Pull the data and then destroy
That makes
it.
sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. But we still need a
And in
fresh
theory,
DB dump.
right. Well, we could test that process though with the old dump. We just want a fresh dump before we.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But that would still require you needing to know how to create a new database and import a dump, which might already be the problem. So if we solve that problem on the Roku,
Sure.
then you won't need the intermediary one. I don't know if it's a limitation due to Roku that's causing this or not, but
I'm not sure if that is a problem.
No.
And I think, but I'll check with you. I think we've done enough, exchanged enough information for now.
okay.
Plus, we've got that issue. We can come back to an issue too.
Okay.
I'm going to just throw out. I mean, once we get this working, there are issues like with Gitter using maybe more than one channel. I don't know if it's been a successful experiment this week, but one thing that would help it is if the bot worked in more than one channel. Like right now, the bot doesn't work in both. So, but once we've got this moved, we can at least explore that as an option. And also, I think the main things that are in the database is our current karma. And I would like to open a discussion about maybe like resetting the karma every once in a while. So I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but
Yeah.
there's a part of me that it's like, the karma, after a while, somebody new, it's like it's meaningless because they're so
No,
far
it's not. No, it's not.
I don't know. I feel like maybe we should just, this is a great discussion to have. Maybe we shouldn't have it on this meeting.
No,
But I would love to have like better definitions of karma, like first time message, instantly 25 karma points or something where you could just be like, welcome to Buddha. And then, I don't know.
I think you're right. Good discussion,
Yes.
but another time.
Yes. I would still like to bring up a bug that would, so that I think it might be worth bringing up for 114.2. If we finished with the sort of like miscellaneous discussions, or do we want to do the making basis up thing easier? Like repeat the discussion that we had in the previous meeting.
What do you think, Tim?
I'm not sure that we need to revisit the subject topic anymore.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So I would like to bring up issue 3873. So Jen, you originally made a report for specifically for one type, an integer field, but it turns out that it's for all numeric fields.
I wouldn't be able to do this until the weekend.
So
Interesting. Okay.
So I started writing a pull request, and I got myself into a rabbit hole because what I saw was that. So my intention was to start doing what people think is correct, as in they do it in d.org as well. They file a pull request with a test that fails first intentionally, and then they fix. So they have a failing test. So I started fixing. I started with a pull request that is fixing. Bear with me. There were some inconsistencies. There were 3 tests in the number.test file for each type of field, and the decimal and bear with me, and the float were all using like field create instance, for example, as a function, whereas for the integer, we were doing like a manual visit this page, create a field, and a test. So I tried to fix that. And where I'm stuck is
And there are also ways to use
a more generic, like when I do normal development of UI, I just use devel and BPM to sort of like output certain things. How do I do that with tests? Like, how do I know? How do I know? Yeah.
There's a
variable-
function you can use in test that's called debug. This is actually in core. So rather than putting like a DPM or a DSM or whatever, where you want to see the message, use debug instead. And it'll basically give you the same output as devel, but it's not like collapsed into a beautiful click through like expandy thing. It just like blah, dumps all of its stuff out on the page, but it's really helpful. I use it all the time in testing.
Okay. And does that message come up when you run the test locally? Is that when it happens?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll try that. Because all my test fixes so far have been
Blind.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Guesswork.
Yeah. When I found debug, it was just like, oh, I've never known about this before. Everything just got so much easier. You're going to be so much more efficient.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Revelation.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool.
Sure.
It's just that some idea is that I'll create, once I fix this bit, the consistency in the tests, then I'll just make sure that I create tests that test all three types of numbers and make sure that they fail, because that's what they do, like leaving the field empty, and then try to fix it. And I have an idea how it can be fixed. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think every field has a function that's like the if empty or whatever. And
Yes.
I suspect that whatever we used for text fields in those doesn't work the same way for number fields.
Yes. So I found out, this was funny as well, and this is why I say I have a feeling how it would be fixed. So the specific hook implementation for number is empty or something like that, whatever it's called, was the same as hook is empty.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, why, like, maybe it didn't make sense. Maybe we're missing a use case there, and this is probably happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did search Drupal.org, and they don't have any such issues filed, but I didn't test with Drupal to actually verify if the bug is there or not. If yes, it might be a good chance to contribute back to it.
So we had these number fields in Drupal 7, and I don't think it was a problem. I think it only became a problem when we changed to the HTML5 element. So that might be a Drupal 8 thing. I'm not sure if it's an issue there or not. But if it is, it probably won't have a comparable fix just because the field system is so different.
Yes.
But
okay.
Never know.
Yeah.
Maybe it only needs that little if statement, and that'll probably be the same.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I added that to the list so that we can revisit next week.
Okay, that's a good one. I added the milestone candidate bug label on there.
Yep,
I think that's a big one. So it's definitely a shocker when you run into it. You're like, why would that not work? So
yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else we need to talk about today?
I'd like to quickly raise one thing after we cancel the call. So just a minor thing.
Okay. All right, well, that's it. Tim, you want to do the honors?
Sure. End the call. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.